Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video and thank you for being here. Today's video we are going to be talking about food anxiety. I actually don't think I've talked about anything like food anxiety, binge eating, disordered eating, anything like that in a while on my channel. I actually think the last video was like over 6 months ago when I was talking about how I stopped binge eating. But since then I've been getting a lot of questions from you guys asking how I'm doing with that, how things have been going, whether or not, I'm still going strong. And yes, I'm happy to share that I am nearly 300 days binge free as of today. Should I back up a bit? I think I should. Before we get started, I did want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to today's sponsor, which is Audible. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Audible, they are the world's largest audiobook database of exclusive fitness programs, exclusive audiobooks, as well as Audible Originals. Audible Originals are audio titles created and narrated by some of the world's best storytellers, and the storytellers come from an array of different disciplines ranging from literature to theater to journalism. You can get your first audiobook free when you sign up to try Audible for 30 days. All you have to do is go to www.audible.com/JordanShrinks or text Jordan Shrinks to 500-500. As you guys know, I'm a big walker and a big runner, and I've actually used Audible for a long time because of those reasons. I actually prefer audiobooks when I walk. I feel like it makes time go by way quicker, especially when I am on the treadmill, or as I like to call it, the dreadmill. The current audiobook I'm listening to is called In the Defense of Food by Michael Pollan, and is about the Western diet and how our obsession with nutrition has kind of been somewhat of a paradox, because the more obsessed we become with nutrition, the less nutritious our food gets. So if you guys are interested in trying the service, like I said, just visit www.audible.com/JordanShrinks or text Jordan Shrinks to 500-500. Alright, so on to the video, on to the topic of food anxiety. I was actually really surprised when I was preparing for this video. Usually when I prepare for videos like this, I like to research other videos on the topic, kind of see what other people are talking about, and kind of identify if there's anything missing that I can touch on, just because I know like that information isn't out there. But to my surprise, there actually isn't much information at all on food anxiety. There are a few videos on YouTube, but they are talking about issues that are much different, like vary a lot from what I've struggled with, and I know a lot of you have struggled with. So food anxiety manifests itself in many different ways. For me, when I got anxious around food, it was usually when I was put in an environment where I could not control what I was going to eat, or at least I did not know what was in the food I had to eat. I was very meticulous about calorie counting, and if I had to go somewhere where the caloric value was not shown, or I did not know and I had to guess, that made me very anxious. So for example, if I went to a family function, if I went to an event, if I went out to a restaurant that didn't have the calorie information published on the menus, I felt a lot of anxiety in those situations, which obviously affected my mood, made me anxious, made me not want to be there, and just overall was not a great time for me. And the reason why I think I was so anxious in these situations is because when it was like the height of my food anxiety and binge eating, it did not take much to trigger a binge cycle for me. So basically, when my binge eating was at its worst, it literally took eating one bad thing for me to like throw everything in the air and say, fuck it, like today was a bad day, I'm gonna eat everything in sight and try again tomorrow. But when I was put in these environments where I didn't know what I was eating, I felt like it was only a matter of time before I ate something that didn't resonate well with me, and then it triggered a binge cycle. Also during this time, I was very obsessive with calorie counting and exercising. So if I exercised for like 2-3 hours that day and I had to be put in a situation where I felt like I was eating back calories that I, purposely tried to burn, that would make me very anxious. And obviously, I think this goes without saying, this is a very negative mindset to have. I'm just putting that out there. That is not normal. Like, you should not be afraid to eat. You should, you should not feel guilt for eating after exercising or anything like that. That was just very much my mindset at that time. So yeah, that was basically the main way my food anxiety manifested, at least in my life. I ended up, skipping a lot of social events, a lot of gatherings, everything like that, just because I was so nervous to be in those environments, which obviously is very sad. You do not want to miss spending time with your friends, family, loved ones because you are anxious around food. With saying that, however, I do want to, mention that there is a difference between, I guess, skipping an event because you just don't want to be there and you don't want to you know, waste your calories versus like skipping an event because you're scared to be there. I know when I started losing weight, before I kind of got into like this disordered thinking, I would skip parties just because I thought, well, I don't want to drink my calories, so I'm not going to be there. And that was a completely different mindset than like, you know, skipping something because I am literally afraid to be there. I also got a lot of food anxiety when I realized I accidentally ate too much of something, or I accidentally ate something, or like miscalculated the calories on something, or, you know, just ended up eating more calories than I had originally anticipated to do. And this usually, again, gave me anxiety because if I, like, say I ate a sandwich and I thought it was like 300 calories and it was actually like 800 calories, that in my head would be enough for me to be like, I fucked up the whole day and I'm gonna binge now. Even though, you know, in hindsight, if I accidentally ate too much, it's really easy for me to undo that damage, which it isn't even really damage, but to undo that mistake by just adjusting my calories elsewhere, or, you know, just getting back on track tomorrow. And then finally, another really big element of food anxiety, and this is the one that a lot of my research kind of pointed to, so it's something I didn't necessarily deal with, but I know a lot of people deal with, and that is just the anxiety of eating in front of people. So feeling anxious, feeling nervous, feeling even stressed or sick, having to actually like consume food in front of other people. For me, like I don't want to say I've struggled with this because I really haven't. When I would binge eat, like I would never do it in front of people, but if I'm eating normally, like I've never really had an issue doing that in front of people. So this type of anxiety affects people even if they're eating on track, they're eating healthy, they just don't want to eat in front of people at all. So honestly, the way I kind of overcame food anxiety, and my best advice I can give, is to kind of just like address it head on. Coming from like somewhat of an orthorexic past, orthorexia meaning like an obsession with only eating healthy food, I had a very warped sense of reality when it came to food. And it actually took me trying to eat that food and realizing that I could eat that food without like blowing up and gaining a bunch of weight, for me to realize that like food doesn't have as much power as I thought it did. And I mean, I did this slowly. Like I started introducing traditionally bad, I put that in quotations because like no foods are inherently bad. It took me introducing things slowly for me to realize that like most of the issues that I had with food were completely like fabricated in my head and they had no real grounding in reality. So for example, I started, you know, putting milk in my coffee, almond milk in my coffee. And it sounds kind of ridiculous, but prior to me putting 10 calories of almond milk in my coffee, it gave me anxiety to drink liquid calories, because when I first started losing weight, one of the things that I made myself do was cut out any type of liquid calorie. So it took me like, you know, putting 10 calories of almond milk in my coffee for me to realize like, oh, you are too stressed over the calories that you are consuming. It also took me trying to eat traditionally unhealthy foods without morphing them into like a healthier version of that food, if that makes sense. So don't get me wrong, there are so many ways you can save calories or make a meal healthier by using an alternative. So for example, like using powdered peanut butter instead of real peanut butter in your oats. Makes sense, tastes the same, but has less fat and has less oil and it's healthier for you. That is an example of something that like I think makes sense to make a switch. I'm talking about I would not eat anything bad. Like it was my goal in life at one point to find healthy alternatives to absolutely everything, when in reality the regular food in itself could be healthy if I just ate it in moderation. But since I labeled foods as good and bad, I had a very hard time, you know, looking at like a slice of pizza, for example, and being like, you can eat that as in moderation, because in my head it was like, you do not eat that, that is not good for you, which obviously kind of fed into my very negative relationship with food, fed into my very negative mindset about food, and just made me anxious around pizza. So if I were to go to a party where there was like pizza, for example, I would not eat it, because in my head that was a no-go, that was a bad food to eat. Despite being around a bunch of friends, fit friends, healthy friends, eating that pizza, it never clicked in my mind like, they're eating it and they're fine. Like it just would not register in my mind that you can eat stuff in moderation. So what I did when I started realizing that this was an actual issue is I tried to make my diet more balanced. And what I mean by this is, if you've watched any of my old videos, you know that I identified as a high carb vegan, which don't get me wrong, I lost weight on a high carb diet, like that's just how I did it. But the problem was, at that time, I was so obsessed with fitting the mold of my diet, of a label, that anything that was outside of the realm of what was acceptable in that diet gave me anxiety. So for example, high fat foods. I did not touch high fat foods because they did not, you know, go well with my high carb diet. Keto is a great example of like the polar opposite of my problem. Like my diet versus keto are, you know, on the two opposite ends of the spectrum, but a lot of people who do keto to lose weight will kind of adapt that similar mentality against carbs, where they think, I lost all this weight by not eating carbs, so therefore carbs are bad. And that was kind of like what I did with fats, when in reality, as I mentioned many times on my channel, it's not carbs, it's not fat, it's not, you know, protein that's making you gain or lose weight. It is calories in versus calories out. So it took me actually learning about nutrition, learning what I needed for my body, and kind of breaking the mold and just being more experimental and more lenient with myself when it came to food for me to actually feel less anxiety about food. It's just important to remember that your diet is not your identity. I had to learn that. I had to remember that yes, you eat typically high carb, but that does not mean you cannot eat chocolate because it's high fat. You know what I mean? Like, it really took me understanding that, like, my life, my identity is not my diet. My diet is a very small, you know, part of my life, and I have to stop living as if it is my life. What I did and what I want you guys to do is to pick one person in your life who you admire and, like, who you look at as someone who has a very healthy relationship with food. And the more you look at them and the more you kind of reflect on how they are and how they are around food, you realize that they do not have these toxic traits that like I did, or that maybe you do when it comes to food. At the end of the day, it is just energy, and the people who have the healthiest relationships with food are the people who do not put that much thought into the fact that like certain foods make you gain weight, or quote unquote make you gain weight. Another big piece of advice I have is to separate yourself from triggers. A lot of us unintentionally trigger ourselves by like our environment, the environments we put ourselves in, and that is something that I had to learn the hard way. Basically, for me, something that was very triggering for me was seeing food that I wanted to eat. So what I had to do was I had to go in, I had to unfollow all my little vegan bakery accounts, even though I love my vegan bakeries, because every time I saw it, I felt anxious because I thought, I cannot eat that. I like looking at pictures of it, but I can't eat it. So I just unfollowed it. So, I mean, it could go either way for you. You might have anxiety by seeing healthy food. You might have anxiety by seeing junk food. Just try your best to separate yourself from what is causing you anxiety. And then my final piece of advice is to try to replace fear with gratitude. This isn't something that, you know, is gonna fix your anxiety, but it is something that definitely helped me cope with mine. Always remembering that, you know, the fact that I can go out and buy food, the fact that I have food on my table is a good thing, and I should feel blessed, and it is something that not everyone has, and therefore it is not worth my energy to stress about it. And I feel like when I think about it like that, it is very liberating, and it just makes me feel a lot better about my circumstances. And then also always remember that people get help for anxiety every single day. They go to therapy, they talk to a friend, and just like they go for regular anxiety, they also can go for food anxiety. You do not have to deal with these issues on your own. You are not alone. I've struggled with it. A lot of people watching this video have struggled with it, and I just want to remind you guys that you're not alone. So I hope this video was helpful, guys. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and leave any advice you have for people down below, because I'm sure a lot of, you know, anxious people are watching this. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. And thanks to Audible for sponsoring.